it's me, CheesyPaninie, and welcome back to another episode of Cheesy's Pixel Notes, where I work on a pixel artwork and talk about my process, the challenges, and stuff I learned along the way. For today's artwork, my previous client, Calorie Cavalier, asked me to make another commission, but this time in the Makopa and Swanky style, which is even more detailed than my previous portraits. The subject this time is Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3, and he also asked me to add the dark sun in the background with a bit of ember effects to tie it all together. But before we get to the art, I just wanted to give this really important piece of advice I got when I was just starting commissions. When working with a client, you always want to get their go signal before you put in a ton of effort and detail into the artwork, because they might have a different vision in mind than yours. In this case, I drew a front-facing firekeeper at the start, but my client decided he wanted her to face to the right with her hand over her mouth, like in Ryan's art. I don't have any problems redoing the sketch since it really only takes 10 to 20 minutes. At most, it could take an hour. But if I went ahead and drew the whole thing in one go without consulting them, you'd encounter 3 possible outcomes. Number 1, the client would love it to bits, which is the best possible outcome, but not always likely to happen. Number 2, the client would not be satisfied but feel bad about asking you to change anything, so they would just accept it but would be less likely to commission you again. And we don't want that. In the third outcome, the client would not be happy with the commission and ask you to change it. A lot of misunderstandings could actually result from this. Your client might feel cheated because they got something that they didn't want, and in turn, you, the artist, might feel like they're taking advantage of you for asking for a lot of changes, which they might not even want to pay for. All of this can be avoided simply by communicating with your client clearly. Ask questions about the details until you get a clear picture of what they want, and if the commission is something that takes a long time to make, giving them regular updates is a really good idea. It can be a once-a-day thing, every other day, or even weekly. This way, if there was something that they want to change, they can say it early, saving you time and energy, unlike if they decide to change it when you're already done. Of course, just because you show them regular updates, it's also still possible that they would suddenly ask you to change a really huge amount of your commission work. And in those cases, I would suggest that you ask them to increase the budget, because that's kind of unfair, man. You gotta also look out for those kinds of clients. You have to be very clear in your terms and services if you're allowing say up to 2 revisions or something like that, or if you're only allowing revisions during the draft period, or you don't accept major revisions after the whole thing is done, stuff like that. You gotta be really clear about these things. As for people who are thinking about hiring someone to commission, please don't ever hesitate to tell them what you want or if there's something that you want changed. At the end of the day, most of these artists just want you to be happy with what they make. Anyways, I know you're here because you wanted to learn pixel art, but I thought I'd put that out there because one day you might think of taking on commissions, and this was one of the most important pieces of advice I got when I was just starting. So once I had my sketch, I resized it and restarted my pixel process. I find it really helpful to have a layer of color over the sketch, just so when I start doing my pixel shapes over it, it's easier for me to distinguish between the sketch and the pixel art. It can be a solid color with different blending modes like multiply and hue, or just lowered opacity. I drew the basic shapes first and filled it in. But before you fill it in, you have to make sure that there are no gaps in between the lines. Otherwise, the paint will just leak out and fill the whole page. And you might say, but Cheesy, there's no gaps at all. It might look that way at first glance, but you might find the gap in the layer where you used the fill tool. You see, if you have 2 layers with different lines, the default setting, which is refer only active layer, it will only consider the lines in the selected layer when you use the fill tool. But if you select the setting, Refer Visible Layers, it will consider all of the lines of the layers when you use the fill tool. So for Firekeeper, you've got her hand positioned over her mouth. Since I'm not entirely sure how many times I have to draw and erase the hand until I'm satisfied with how it looks, it's better to put it in a separate layer. It also makes it easier to move around without affecting the face. Another technique that I like to do when I'm drawing in pixel art is to break down the drawing into shapes and use different colors temporarily just to separate them. One of the disadvantages of pixel art is you can't really do smooth lines, so sometimes it's difficult to figure out how to draw a certain shape, so I find it a lot easier to imagine the shape this way. So for Firekeeper's headpiece, I didn't have any specific detail planned. All I knew was I wanted it to be sparkly. In cases like this where the detail is not super important but you want it to come out a certain way, it is best to add these details straight to pixel instead of sketching first. Say you drew tiny jewels and embellishments on the headpiece on pencil. Once you shrink the sketch, you're definitely not going to see those details anymore. They'll just be abstract dots in the canvas, and it would be a little harder to visualize it. Now, I'm not familiar at all with any of the Dark Souls games. I've heard about it, but I've never personally played it. I didn't know anything about the general lore, so I had to do a little bit of research myself to understand the details of the characters. My client did provide me with some references which helped a ton, but I was very confused about how I should draw her headpiece. I couldn't find a good picture of it in game, and I couldn't find game art at the time. I only found mostly fan art, so I used art by Ryan and Siamano 240 as inspiration. And by the way, I've actually been trying to balance gaming videos, Terraria videos, and art videos on the channel, and though it's not your typical YouTube channel, I think it was the right choice for me because I feel like I haven't had content burnout just yet. If I get bored of one thing, I can just take a break from it and do another thing. For the art side of the channel though, I really want to know your thoughts. I wanted to do pixel art note videos for every commission I had, but it's just not sustainable for me since it takes a whole lot of time to do the scripting, recording, and all of that stuff, so I figured that speed paints with music or random rambles is a good alternative to some of those videos. I'm going to do them for most of my commissions, granted that my clients give me permission, of course, and do pixel art notes for the ones I feel like I have a lot to say about when it comes to tips and tricks and stuff that I've learned. Now, what I want to know is, what other types of art content would you enjoy seeing from me? Please let me know down in the comments below and I'll see if I can do it. Once I finish drawing the important elements of the piece, I like to put a layer of color on top of it and change the layer properties. In this one, I put a yellow-orange layer, changed the mode to color burn, and lowered the opacity to 100 just to give it that warmer tone. Of course, not all modes are perfect, and sometimes some parts kind of stick out like a sore thumb, like the light gray bits of the headpiece. To fix that, I made another layer and colored the spots with the same yellow-orange color, which I would change to later, and put it on hard light mode with an opacity of 109. And our piece is done. Though since my client wanted it in two different styles, I had to retrace it so that the Macopa style portrait matches with the swanky style portrait. And here's the finished product. To summarize everything, always communicate with your client when doing commissions to avoid miscommunication and doing extra work. Place a layer of color over your sketch to make it easier to distinguish between your sketch and pixel shapes. Make sure that the lines you make don't have gaps before you use the fill tool. Separate overlapping elements in layers. Break down the drawing into shapes of different colors to visualize it better before putting details and lines. Small, intricate details are best done straight to pixel instead of sketching first in some cases where the size of your art is very small. Experiment with layer modes and properties. Also, please keep in mind that these tips are not golden rules. These are just tips based on my style and preference for making pixel art. In the end, it's all up to you which ones you follow and which ones you don't. If you would like to see the full process of my pixel art without any commentary, just a time-lapse speed paint over music, link is in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment what you think, and subscribe for more. And if you want to support me further, check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, Redbubble, and maybe, if you feel like it, hire me for a commission by checking out my commissions page on my site. But for now, I'm just gonna go do my thing, and you guys do your thing, and I'll see you guys later. Take it easy, stay cheesy.